What do you think of the fires in LA? What happened?
Well, it's quite sad, and it was shocking because normally January is a quiet time in the fire business in California. The winds and the conditions, as far as the dryness, the relative humidity, it was the perfect storm, and so it's very, very sad of the amount of loss and destruction that we witnessed.
And now it comes down to the cleanup part. We're getting to the cleanup stages, and people are questioning what are the environmental impacts of these fires. And they are saying, the Army Corps of Engineers has said they're going to clean up 6 inches of soil. They may not do any testing, and the state has requirements for building. Can you tell us what you see with your experience, what's happening?
Like an earthquake, these are acts of God, Mother Nature, and there's really no way to mitigate against these very large events. As far as toxic heavy metals that are released, this is as a result of lead-based paint, asbestos in older homes, batteries in cars, electric vehicles. So there's a lot of contributing factors. And the fires normally in a wildfire like we saw in Los Angeles are burning around 1,500, 1,700 degrees. And so that pyrolysis, that baking releases, actually transforms these materials and makes them more volatile, makes them airborne, and makes them, in some cases, water soluble. And so they get into the air, they get into the soil, and they get into the water table. And the best cleanup, we have a saying at our office, the best fire is one that never starts. So mitigating and trying to prevent the fire is the best solution. If we have to clean up after the fact, it's like putting a car together that's been in a bad accident, right? It's never going to be the same.
Some people are worried that there are impacts of these fires environmentally, and some people might feel that it's in the air, some people may feel that it's in the soil. Can you tell us what are your thoughts on that?
Ever since I started working in this space, I've talked with a lot of hazmat professionals, fire chiefs, fire captains, and my father's house burned in wine country up in Northern California some years back. And I met with the fire chief in Sonoma County, and the EPA had collected all the burned vehicles. There was not a few hundred or a few thousand. It was in excess of 10,000 vehicles. And similar to a junkyard, they had kind of stacked them on top of each other. And that following spring, it was kind of a sprinkling rainy day, and I was talking with the fire chief, and I said, listen, most of those cars had lead, and that lead became lead oxide, and this rain is now washing it, and it's kind of flowing into the storm drain, and it's flowing into the soil, and it's not going to be treated. There's no way to capture it. What is the state or the county doing about it? And his response was very alarming for me, and he basically said, this is the most expensive real estate arguably in the world, and we have a wine region. We cannot just remove 20 yards of dirt from thousands of acres. And so I challenged him, and I said, well, the kids are going to be showering in this water, and there's lead in it, there's cadmium and other heavy metals. And he said, you're right, but we have no mitigation. We have no way of containing it. And so ever since then, the fire problem for me has become an environmental problem. And it's not just about carbon, it's not just about the smog forming, greenhouse gases, it's not even about the particles and asthma and breathing difficulties. It's what's below the surface and what you don't see. And so, again, whether the Army Corps of Engineers removes 6 inches of dirt or 6 feet of dirt, the reality is this is a problem, and there's not an easy answer for it.
When was it that you start thinking about the soil? How did you get into that?
Some years back, we had a bad fire in California, the Paradise Fire, and some people died. And about a year later, I learned that the EPA was handing out bottled water to the residents because they had found 1,000 parts per million benzene in the tap water. And I was thinking to myself, okay, Northern California is not the Gulf, is not Texas. You know, we don't have any real refineries. Benzene is an aromatic compound. It's a very toxic compound. And so again, it was my curiosity, where is benzene coming from? And why is the contamination so high that they have to hand out bottled waters? So this bothered me for a year. I kept asking questions. I work with Stanford. We have advisors at Cal Berkeley, which is a very strong chemistry department up in Northern California. And nobody was able to give me a good answer. And about a year and a half later, a company was installing some equipment at our facility, and he reminded me that in the 50s, when we were building gas stations, the practice was to basically dig a hole, drop a tank in the ground, and then they would use mastic or tar to do the waterproofing and corrosion control. When he said tar and mastic, immediately the puzzle fell into place, because those are hydrocarbons, those are present, and they're encapsulated, they're fixed. But when this 1700-degree wall of fire comes, it releases that, and it doesn't need very much to contaminate the water table. So that's where the 1,000 parts per million. And so heavy metals from batteries, from paints, building materials, these are things that we call them byproducts of combustion. In other words, the element itself might be safe, but after you burn it, it becomes toxic. It becomes a hazard.
And then you saw that it could get into the soil, because in that scenario, it was in the water.
Exactly. And we've seen, for example, high levels of metal can lead to things like Alzheimer's, dementia. There are issues that could result from even growing vegetables in soil that has higher levels of metals than the EPA allowable.